I'm Alex and welcome back to another episode of Each week I pick a topic I know a little bit about and we learn about it together. And today we're talking about a genre of music that changed nightlife, changed culture, and came from one of the most unlikely places imaginable. It's techno. That repetitive, hypnotic, pounding electronic music that fills warehouses, festivals, and dark rooms all over the globe. But here's the thing, I always assumed techno was a European thing, like Berlin, Ibiza, and Amsterdam. Turns out I was completely wrong. Techno was born in Detroit, Michigan, one of the most economically devastated cities in America. How did that happen? Who started it? And what actually makes techno, well, techno? And how did it go from underground Detroit basements to one of the biggest music movements on earth? So today, we're breaking down the origins, the sound, the culture, and the legacy of my favorite genre of music, techno. Before we get into the history, let's talk about the sound. Techno is electronic dance music built around a few key elements. First, the kick drum. Techno almost always runs on a 4 on the floor beat. That means a kick drum hitting on every beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over. It's that steady driving pulse that locks you in. On top of that, we've got synthesizers, creating the melodies, textures, and atmospheres. Hi-hats and cymbals adding rhythm, and usually a deep rolling bass line underneath everything. Most techno sits between 120 to 150 beats per minute, fast enough to feel urgent, but slow enough to feel hypnotic. And here's what separates techno from other electronic music. It's usually stripped back, refined, minimal, and repetitive on purpose. There aren't big vocal hooks or pop song structures. Instead, tracks building slowly, layering sounds on top of one another, creating tension, and release over 6, 8, and even sometimes 10 minutes. It's music designed less for listening and more for feeling, for losing yourself in. And that philosophy didn't come from nowhere. It came from a very specific time and a very specific place. To understand where techno came from, you have to understand Detroit in the early 1980s. Detroit was once the industrial powerhouse of America, the Motor City, home of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. But by the late 70s and the early 80s, the auto industry was collapsing. Factories were closing, unemployment was skyrocketing, white flight had hollowed out huge parts of the city. Detroit was a city that felt like the future had just abandoned it. And it was in that environment that 3 young men from the suburb of Belleville started making music. Juan Atkins, Derek May, and Kevin Saunderson. They're known as the Belleville Three, and they're widely credited as the originators of techno.
I would believe that a black group of individuals could make music like that. And we turn that into, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you.
They were high school friends who shared a love of electronic music, such as Kraftwerk from Germany, Parliament Funkadelic, Prince, and a Detroit radio DJ called the Electrifying Mojo, who played all of it side by side. Juan Atkins is often called the grandfather of techno. He was the first to start producing tracks that fused funk rhythms with European synth sounds. His group, Cybertron, released Clear in 1983, which is considered one of the earliest techno records ever. Derek May described the sound famously as George Clinton and Kraftwerk stuck in an elevator with a sequencer to keep them busy. And Kevin Saunderson brought a slightly more accessible, soulful edge. His track, Big Fun, under the name Inner City, became one of the first techno songs to ever chart internationally. What all three shared was a vision of the future, In a city that was falling apart, they built music that sounded like tomorrow to give them some hope. Techno couldn't have existed without specific pieces of technology. In the early 80s, a wave of affordable electronic instruments hit the market, and they changed everything. The Roland TR-808 drum machine, the Roland TR-909, the Roland TB-303 bass synthesizer, and the Korg and Yamaha synths that were suddenly within reach of bedroom producers. These machines were actually commercial failures when they launched. Musicians at the time wanted something realistic sounding. These machines sounded robotic and artificial, but that's exactly what the Detroit producers loved about them. The 808 gave them those deep, punchy kicks, the 909 gave them crisp hi-hats and snares, and the 303 gave them that squelchy, acidic bass line that would later define an entire sub-genre. For the first time, you didn't need a band, you didn't need a studio. You can make futuristic music in your bedroom with only a few machines, a vision, and a bit of creativity. And that democratization of music production is a huge part of why techno spread so fast. Here's where the story takes a turn that the Belleville Three never expected. In the mid to late 1980s, techno records from Detroit started making their way to Europe, especially in places like the UK, Belgium, and Germany. And the Europeans went absolutely mad for it. In the UK, techno collided with acid house and the emerging rave culture. Suddenly, thousands of people were gathering in fields, warehouses, and abandoned buildings to dance the night away. The UK rave scene of the late 80s and early 90s became a full-blown cultural movement, and it terrified the establishment. The British government eventually passed the Criminal Justice Act in 1994, which truly made it illegal to gather around music characterised by, and I'm not making this up, repetitive beats. They actually tried to legislate techno out of existence. But the place where techno found its deepest home was Berlin. After the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the city was full of abandoned buildings, empty warehouses, and a population desperate to celebrate the freedom that they had just achieved. Techno became the soundtrack of reunification. Clubs like Tresor, which opened in a former department store vault, and later Berghain, which I've actually been inside of, became legendary. Berlin didn't just adopt techno, it built an entire identity around it. To this day, Berlin's club culture is so significant that it was granted UNESCO Cultural Heritage status in 2024. The irony of it all is while techno was conquering Europe, it was still largely underground in the US. The music that America created became bigger everywhere else other than there. Techno isn't just a genre, it's a culture, and that culture has a few defining features. First, the focus is on the DJ, not the celebrity. In techno, the DJ is a curator. They build a journey over hours, reading the room, blending tracks. It's less about individual songs and more about the arc of the entire night. Second, the spaces. Techno thrives in dark, industrial, stripped-back environments, such as warehouses, basements, concrete clubs with no frills. The aesthetic matches the music, raw, functional, and intense. Third is inclusivity. From its very beginning, techno was shaped by black, queer, and working class communities. Detroit scene, Chicago house scene, and the rave movement all shared roots in spaces where people who were marginalised elsewhere could come together. And fourth, anonymity. In techno culture, it's not about what you look like or who you are or where you came from. The darkness of the club is the point. You're there for the music and the collective experience. That ethos is a huge part of why techno has endured while other trends have just come and gone. Like any genre that's been around for 40 years, techno has splintered into dozens of subgenres. You have minimal techno, which is just stripped down to almost nothing, just a kick and a hi-hat and a hypnotic loop. Artists like Richie Hawtin and Ricardo Villalobos helped define that sound. There's industrial techno or screens, which is darker, heavier and almost aggressive. Think pounding kicks in a concrete room. There's acid techno, which was built around that squelchy 303 bass line that we spoke about earlier. There's melodic techno, which has exploded in popularity recently. Artists like Amelia Lenz, Charlotte DeWitt and Annie Ma have brought more emotional, sweeping sounds into the genre. It's arguably the most mainstream techno has ever been. And then there's a crossover into pop culture. Techno and electronic sounds now influence mainstream pop, hip-hop and film soundtracks. The genre that started in Detroit basements now touches almost every corner of modern music. Today, techno is a global phenomenon. Festivals like Awakenings in the Netherlands, which I've personally been to, and can say was an absolutely amazing experience. Then you've got the things like Movement in Detroit and Time Warp in Germany. These festivals draw hundreds of thousands of people every single year. The Movement Festival in Detroit is particularly special because it happens in the city where it all began. Hart Plaza, right on the riverfront. Streaming has also changed things. Platforms like Resident Advisor, SoundCloud, and Boiler Room, which actually films DJ sets and broadcasts them online, have made techno more accessible than ever. A kid in Sao Paulo, Tokyo, or Lagos can now discover the same underground DJ set as someone living in Berlin. The global reach has expanded massively. South America, Asia, and Africa all have thriving and fast-growing techno scenes. And the production tools have evolved as well. What once required a room full of hardware can now be done on a laptop with software like Ableton Live. The barrier to entry has never ever been lower. Learning about techno made me realise something. It's so much more than just dance music. It was born in a city that was falling apart and it still sounded like the future anyway. It crossed oceans, soundtracked the fall of a wall, survived governments trying to ban it, and built a culture around inclusivity, anonymity, and collective experience. From 3 friends in Belleville, Michigan, to warehouses in London, to the concrete floors of one of the craziest clubs that I've ever had the pleasure of being to in Berghain, to festival stages on every continent. Techno didn't ask for permission, it just kept going. 4 to the floor, beat after beat. And that, my friends, is techno music. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next week where we'll get the chance to learn about another topic. Bye for now.